Welcome to this mini lecture on the purposes of education. Common sense suggests that the goal or purpose of education is teaching and learning about our society and culture, right? But we are critical explorers, and therefore we must ask some difficult questions. For instance, we learn that in a pluralistic society like ours, there are many philosophies of education. People have different and sometimes conflicting ideas about who we educate, what we teach, and why. That being the case, it seems reasonable that we would have different ideas about the purpose of education. Is education to prepare us for the work world, to be knowledgeable citizens of a free and democratic society, or maybe to move up in the world? Instead of reading a chapter from the textbook, for this topic, I've gathered two short videos for you to view in addition to this one. The first discusses Martin Luther King's vision about the purpose of education. The second is a young philosopher's thoughts on the purposes and goals of education. Together with this mini lecture, I think they present a very broad and mixed view of the purposes people have in mind about education. So here I'm going to share some important points about the goals of education from Stanford University professor David Labaree. Labaree describes himself as a sociologically oriented historian of education who explores the tensions between education and society. He analyzes the institutional character of organizations such as high schools, community colleges, and higher education. He looks at the role of key groups that affect education, such as teachers, teacher educators, and reform movements. He looks at the conflicting purposes and functions of education in a liberal democracy. In his article, Public Goods, Private Goods, The American Struggle Over Educational Goals, he describes three competing purposes of education. Let's take a look at those purposes here. So first, Labaree suggests, education is for democratic equality. Here, the goal of education or formal schooling is to prepare people to be citizens in the society. School is considered a public good or something that is created and sustained by the public for a public purpose. Does this sound like something you remember from the early colonial and 19th centuries? In order for a democracy to function, its citizens must learn about what a democracy is, right? Next, Labaree suggests the purpose of education as a public good is for social efficiency. Here, education is said to prepare people to become workers in the society so that society runs smoothly and efficiently. I find this purpose expressed by much of the legislation and policy around adult education where I work. Finally, Labaree writes that school is also used as a private good. People use schooling as a means to secure good jobs and social positions. Maybe some of us, and I include myself here, think that this is an important goal of education. What groups of students might use education as a private good to move up in the world? In sum, Labaree writes about these three competing purposes to prepare citizens, to prepare workers, and to compete for social positions. They are competing because, depending on the purpose, you would see different instructional practices and curricula focused on different outcomes. Do you remember back in week 2 when we read the article about teaching in 2018? And so many of us were surprised or even outraged to read that parents didn't want their children to become teachers. What purpose of education do you think the parents were concerned with? Certainly, becoming a teacher would be in the middle bubble to prepare a worker. We always need more teachers, and teachers can get jobs. But the parents were steering their kids away from the profession. What do you think they had in mind? I'm going to leave you with that thought and let you view the other two videos on the purposes of education. If you want to learn more about Labory's ideas and read his article, I've included it as optional reading this week. Enjoy.